I've been asked to put together a list of 5 things that I wish I had known when I got into this whole technology software career. And if I could send those thoughts back to my younger self, how much easier life would be. So I'm going to run down 5 things and talk through some of the ways that they could have helped me. And most of these are things I've realized and I use them to help me now. Uh, Number one, treating people with respect is probably the most important way to get the most work done in your company. Y- Think of fostering helpfulness in your team and helpfulness toward your customers. If you create that mindset, it just makes it so much easier for everybody to uh, default to being respectful and not accidentally dismissing folks and kind of wasting their time. And that loops in with the idea of the daily bureaucracy that is necessary. There's good reasons for it, but it's important to make sure that people know that they're not just a cog in a machine. That you respect their input. And if you make sure to get that right and communicate that, and you can do so both uh, in the patterns of interaction you have with your team, but just saying it outright, like I value you. You can say that straight up, and people will start to um, uh, feel like they ought to be treated that way internally, and then feel empowered to treat each other that way, and then treat their customers that way. And you want that kind of virtuous cycle. And lo and behold, it's infectious. Your customers might even start treating you that way. So that's one. Here's a second. Um, when you're putting together your company, and the kinds of work you need to get done as a startup. There's a pattern I like to use that walks you from that kind of scrappy need to get income wherever you can mode. And so you're doing services, right? You're providing solutions, and maybe you don't have a big block of cash from your VCs to get you all the way to a product. So rather than just kind of strapping yourself to the service work wheel and spinning it forever, um, when you're doing your service work, always carve off some fraction of the work you're going to do to generate speed improvements to the service work you're doing, right? You build tools so that you're faster. And I'm talking about software. Software has got this great multiplying effect. So if you're doing service work, you always want to be encouraging your team, and you can wade in maybe as a senior technologist and help provide tools that increase the speed of everyone who's doing their work. And what you'll find is as you're increasing your own speed, you're accidentally getting close to making products, or it becomes so easy to create a product because you have such high speed tools, right? You could do service work that makes a tool that lets you create a product in a week. And that's where you want to be as a company, is a solution provider. Sure. Um, that's going to make sure you can pay the bills and you're going to take what you can get, but always have in mind that you want to get to products because you want that revenue where you don't spend hours and you create customers and revenue. That's where you want to get to. And if you follow that path along the way, you'll do well. All right. Number three, third thing I wish I knew, um, continuous learning needs to be the norm, right? Yeah, and that's something that I've always had in my family, but I've got a mom who's an educator of educators, so it's something that is has always been encouraged, but that's not something that everyone knows necessarily, and it needs to be something that is overtly part of your culture in your company. That continuous learning needs to be held forth by example. You need to be sending around links. Check this out. You need to get together and talk about how this video I watched I learned something from and I did this with it, right? That connecting the dots for folks that their work life can be better um, from spending the time to learn stuff. And people will appreciate being handed the time to improve themselves. That's, I'd say, one of the top line items for job satisfaction is being encouraged to become better in the course of your daily efforts and putting together that culture of folks helping each other um, with learning resources in this virtuous cycle of becoming better. That's going to pay dividends up, down, left, right. All right. Number 4. Um, this is a very technical one for a software team, but the senior coders out there are going to know what I'm talking about. I claim, and this is my opinion, that strictly enforcing a coding style just it's not worth it. When you strictly enforce a coding style, it sucks the creative life out of the folks on your teams. Now, that I'm not saying Wild West. Everyone gets to do anything they want willy-nilly, and Jim over there likes single letter variables. But flip it around, right? Instead of having everyone have to thread a needle that is demanded, I want to be able to see who wrote what code. How do you separate your functions from each other? I want, Bob does it this way, Fred does it that way, Jane does it this way, down the list, right? You want to be able to see who wrote what and let folks think in terms of how they fulfill the needed thing, right? The what's the needed thing? Clarity, the comments, the variables. If you put that all into place as a framework of, I need you to fulfill these kinds of things in the code you write, as opposed to you must do it specifically this way. What you'll find is people are going to take ownership of wanting to communicate clearly with their code, as opposed to just turning the crank on something that they, are disgruntled about and, barely phone it in. You want to engage people to take pride in this communication of from developer to developer in that code. And then number 5, and this is the last one. When you're in a situation of brainstorming, right, coming up with ideas, building up a new product or how to solve a problem, what style something could be, you're throwing around ideas. This is a lesson I learned from doing improv theater. Don't say no when you as the first word when you respond to someone's idea, right? So you in improv theater, you always start out with yes and. That's an exercise that you do in improv theater. You either say it out loud or you say it in your mind before you start to talk. There's a very strong propensity for folks to say no, but as the initial phrase. So someone says, "Oh, I think we could try a black background on this whole website." Um, the other person says, no, 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 we should do a black background with red lettering on the bottom. And the person didn't mean no. They meant yes, right? They wanted to build on an idea. And that's a simple example, but what you'll find is if you shut people down with that no phrase, particularly when there's a little bit of an alpha structure going on of who's in charge of whom, um, if you want to collect people's ideas and get them to be willing to share their ideas, their precious notions, if you shut people down and body slam them verbally every time they come up with something, they'll stop coming up with something, right? They'll just kind of sit there. And what you'll end up with is a bunch of folks kind of swaggering and saying no to each other in some sort of contest instead of people feeling safe that they could throw their ideas out there and they'll be respected. You want all those smart people, creative people to feel encouraged and not have a bunch of silent people who are, not going to get burned again, because you want those ideas. You want them all. Well, I'm counting them up. That's 5. And I hope that's some advice that I can send back in time as soon as we get this time machine technology working. I'm going to be in a much better place myself. But who knows? I've got my fingers crossed that some of this could be a little bit helpful to you along your journey. And I'm certainly going to listen to some of what I came up with there and maybe even write down a little punch list on a Post-it note and keep these kinds of things in mind as I head through my day. Well, thanks for your attention and hope you have some good luck out there.